Clinical trials are changing and evolving, and EDC systems are changing and evolving as well. When you look at the changes that are occurring, do you believe those changes are going to help resolve some of the delay challenges noted in our poll question? And can you discuss benefits that our audience can expect to see from the evolution in EDC systems?
Yeah, so I do think that it's going to help a lot. And I do think there's going to be an opportunity, the systems being in place that can have features and functions that can make all this stuff easier, including enrollment. We could talk about that. Is one thing. The ability for the industry to adapt those systems and take advantage of what's available to actually improve the delays is another thing. But I think the technology will be there to allow a lot of these problems to go away. So let's take that first poll question for a second. You sit there and go, bringing in new data. The systems are being built now that will allow that data to come in easily, seamlessly, understanding the source of it, keeping track of all the lineage, and being able to put it in a place that could be acted upon. And that's, technically there's extremely elegant ways of doing that. There's integration technologies. If you think of what I said earlier about the transformation of capabilities, a capability could be grabbing a piece of data from a medical device, or grabbing a piece of data from a home health nurse visit, and understanding when those are supposed to occur, and being able to elegantly bring them into the ecosystem of clinical data that can be acted upon, and keeping track of the lineage so you know how it was collected, who collected it, and what you could use it for. Again, the fit for purpose problem. So those things will definitely make the different kinds of data easier. If you think about other things like, I'd be curious what the next poll question, but if you think about build times, which I'm sure will show up somewhere, once you have capabilities as opposed to systems, and those capabilities are integrated, you're in a single build environment to field it rather than 2 or 3 build environments around RTSM or data or EDC. You could be in a single build environment that would make it much easier to and shorter to put these systems together, and also potentially cutting down the integration costs, which is going to another delay that you could run into, just putting those systems up. So these systems are evolving. I touched on enrollment, and I know it's not a big part of these discussions, but if you think of the barriers to participation within a clinical trial, excuse me, I remember we had a conference a bunch of years ago, and we were talking about enrollment rates for oncology. And they were surprisingly low, the number of cancer patients that actually ended up in a clinical trial. And we asked a group of people the #1 barrier to that enrollment, and it was parking. Of all things, it was parking. And so, the ability to do home health, the ability to do virtual visits, the telemedicine, you don't have to park if you have people coming to you, and you don't have to travel to a site if you're doing it virtually. So I think those conveniences and the systems that can bring all that together, meaning capabilities of grabbing the data from a home health nurse, or grabbing the data from a device, or grabbing the data from a telemedicine visit, which is an extremely data-rich environment. You can record someone's voice, you have video to, can really make it easier in terms of the barrier of enrollment. I have a whole little stump speech on enrollment, but we can get to that later if we have time. Okay. I think there's a lot society could do about that too. But I do think that when you start to think of all the different data, all the way it could be collected, that you can make a huge impact on all these delay areas one at a time. I don't think one of them is going to account for 80% of the time, but I think if you could chip away at build time, you could chip away at enrollment time, you could chip away at different data coming into the systems, I think you can make a huge impact. And I think the software industry is reacting to that. At least I know in our case, we're reacting to that as much as we can.
And you just mentioned virtual trials, and that was actually the next question I had on my list. So you mentioned a couple things, the parking and how you can eliminate that with home health visits. But we did get a couple questions from some of our registrants. about that topic. Virtual trials are hot right now. I think there's a handful of topics, real world evidence, virtual trials, AI, and machine learning, that doesn't matter what I write about them. It seems like those articles get a ton of downloads and people are just looking for whatever information they can get. But aside from what you already mentioned, are there ways EDC will be able to further enable the use of virtual trials? Just make them easier for companies to adopt and for sites and patients to use?
Yeah, that's enough. So, well, EDC. So I think virtual trials are going to get easier, and I think EDC or data collection has an important role to play in it. Meaning, now, it's if you think about your classic visit schedule that EDC was built on, just think about a data collection schedule. So we're expecting to get this data from this device or this data from this virtual visit on this date. So EDC systems will be able to make that at least known and be able to get that data in when it's done. I think the real thing that people have to think about with virtual trials is not necessarily EDC directly, because I do think that the EDC systems will be able to adapt over time as the data collection gets better. But I think they have to think about the sites and the patients. Some people think that if I give a bunch of devices and a bunch of diaries and hand them a phone, and that the patients will be so much happier. And the truth is that I have this crazy image in my brain of a guy wearing this patch and holding this phone and wearing this halter vest and told to go home and be in a clinical trial. And it seems burdensome. And then you also have the problem of trying to teach sites how to teach patients how to use all these devices. Like, how do you Bluetooth connect it to my device? And how do you use it? And how do you get it going? And I always caution people, I said, in the world of virtual trials where you're going device happy, to try to remember the basics, which is you're just trying to collect the right data at the right time in the right way to meet a hypothesis of your clinical trial. And you have to be very conscious about the burden you're putting on both your sites, because they're not IT experts, and your patients, because many of them are not, tech savvy. And if you give them too many things to think about, they're not going to want to be compliant in the clinical trial. But I think this hybrid trial and virtual trial is going to take hold, and I think it's going to be very, very it's going to be permanently changed that way for certain therapeutic areas, and I think it's going to be pretty exciting to see. And I think the technology will allow that to happen, assuming that the industry has a very thoughtful approach to how they go there.